Hi, welcome to the latest ECIST podcast. I'm joined today by the team from the Discharge Lounge in Walsall Manor Hospital. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name's Rachel Dawson, a senior sister in Discharge Lounge.
I'm Nicola Dixon, I'm the lead nurse for capacity and patient flow.
And my name's Hobbs, Chief Operating Officer for the Trust.
Thank you guys and welcome to our podcast series. Right, so we're talking today about your Discharge Lounge, and this is something I think is going to have a lot of interest in this particular subject. We see lots of discharge lounges across the country, but when I heard about yours, I was really intrigued. So really wanted to dig into that a bit more detail. Then I'm going to come to you first. What was the background to setting up the discharge lounge in the first place?
Sure. Well, I joined the Trust roughly 3 years ago now. And when I joined, it was clear, like many organisations, that the Discharge Lounge had functioned from multiple different locations within the Trust, had never seemed to have a proper permanent home, possibly hadn't had sort of the stable leadership of the workforce to maximise its ability, and also wasn't necessarily aligned in terms of its opening hours with the demand for patient flow and safe discharge from hospital. So we, like every trust, has the permanent challenge of maintaining safe and timely flow through the hospital. And in my view, the Discharge Lounge, and in fact I think in the literature evidence base, the Discharge Lounge can play a huge role in doing that by releasing inpatient hospital beds earlier in the day, supporting transfers then from AMU or other assessment units into inpatient beds, and ultimately then from ED into those assessment units. So we made sure that the Discharge Lounge here had some certainty with its home, which is where it is now on what was previously known as Ward 8 in the Walsall Manor Hospital. We also made sure, and Rach has been the lead for this, that we had stable nursing leadership, permanent staff arrangements for the lounge to allow the service to develop and build and grow. And we've done a lot of work, whether it's process work such as identification the day before of patients that will be discharged tomorrow, that are pre-confirmed discharges, and getting them to the lounge first thing in the morning. Whether it's extending the skill set of Rachel's team such that final treatments, things like antibiotics, intravenous antibiotics or injection treatments can be given there, or whether it's the myriad of quality improvements, and I'll leave Rach to talk about some of those, to improve the experience of patient discharge. It's been a concerted effort over the last 3 years. Most recently we piloted over the recent winter an extension in the hours. So our Discharge Lounge now opens at 7 AM, runs through to 10 PM during weekdays, and is open for a full 12-hour shift at the weekends. And we've substantiated that with an approved business case to make that permanent, having done that as a pilot over winter. We'll talk more, I suspect, about the impact of that, but from a patient flow perspective, it's been huge and is something that we continue to build upon.
That's really helpful background, and it's just helps to set the scene a little bit. So, Rach and Nikki, so in terms of how the Discharge Lounge operates now, and what may be slightly different to what maybe happened some years ago, what are the kind of things that you're doing within the Discharge Lounge that's different?
I think from our point of view, the first thing that we did was actually do some collaborative work in between patient flow and Discharge Lounge. Previously the Discharge Lounge was a standalone area, standalone process, and what we've done, we've joined that together, so the two teams work very, very closely together. I actually oversee patient flow and the Discharge Lounge, so the link is there straight away. The benefit for us of that is that Discharge Lounge can almost be, the need for Discharge Lounge can be altered according to where we need the support for patient flow. So it's quite flexible in that sense. And that's how it started off for us, wasn't it?
Yeah, with permanent staff more than anything, because it was like a bank agency, like you were saying earlier. Getting good leadership in the department first thing, and then building your workforce within that. Bringing other people's ideas in as well.
Well, I was going to come on to that, so I think it's a really good point. So in terms of what we see regularly with discharge, and the kind of passive environment where patients are sent down, how are you acting in more of a active way, I suppose?
The biggest thing for us right from the beginning is we didn't want it just to be an area where patients just were sent to wait to go home. For us, it's a very important part of the patient journey, and we wanted it to become a normal part of the patient journey as well. So as well as doing the work actually, which Rachel will tell you about in the discharge lounge itself, it's about education for the wards as well, so that they understand that that will be the patient's journey. All of our patients that are being discharged go to discharge lounge unless it's not which patients can go.
Right,
So it's about normalising that as part of their journey.
So what kind of additional services do you offer then, Rach?
So the first key thing for me was the patient experience. So as like Nikki said, not just to have patients sat there. So we've made the area more homely, more comfortable, more welcoming, more that one step closer to home. So we've got reclining chairs, we've got sofas, we've got tables, so it's more like a dining experience when the patients come down for their meals. We also provide a good hydration for the patients. They've got access to cold drinks, hot drinks that they can help themselves to. Obviously staff help the ones that can't. We come up with like a picnic style lunch for those sort of things that you didn't have on the ward. So they'll have sandwiches, they'll have, I know it sounds silly, but pork pies, sausage rolls, those sort of things that you pick up at the fridge at home that you don't get access to in hospital. We also provide the hot meals that patients need, and special dietary requirements. There's nothing that's left out just because they're in a separate department as the discharge lounge. They don't go without. They're treated exactly as a patient, which they should do. As before, it was sort of like they've moved to the lounge and they didn't get the same service as they get as a patient on the ward. And that was a big key thing for me, to make sure that everywhere within the trust knew they're still our patients.
Yeah, it feels like there's a real sense that this is part of the journey.
Yes,
absolutely,
It's just that we should be looking after our patients in that environment as
exactly
much as we
the same.
anywhere else. And that goes to the next point. The next point I'm going to come to you, Ned, and ask you in terms of, you touched before about valuing the service and seeing it as a valuable part of the organisation and not just a Cinderella service tucked in the corner somewhere. What kind of impact has these guys, their work, done on the wider organisation?
Absolutely huge, in my view. I mean, like every trust, we've had lots of different interventions to support improved emergency care and improved flow through the hospital. But I can't think of any other single interventions that have had any bigger impact than the changes that we've made in the discharge lounge. So the fact that it's a pull mechanism, so it's Rachel's staff that collect patients from wards. The fact, as Rachel and Nikki have said, that the default, unless there's a clinical reason not to, is that patients will leave via the discharge lounge, means we have more than doubled the number of patients that are being discharged through the discharge lounge. So 2 or 3 years ago, in the region of sort of 60 to 70 patients per week, now comfortably in excess of 150 patients per week pretty regularly. And what that means, and I've said this quite a lot internally, is that for each one patient that accesses the discharge lounge, typically there's the potential for 5 patients to benefit. There's the patient going to the lounge that will get good experience, good homely environment and well looked after for their final few hours with us. There's the patient that's sat on an assessment unit needing to get into that specialist ward that will get there because the bed's been vacated. There's the patient in ED that needs to get to the assessment unit. There's the patient on the back of an ambulance that needs to get into ED. And more, given the current challenges in urgent and emergency care, there's a patient at home that's dialed 999 that needs that ambulance to get to them. So I genuinely cannot think of any other intervention along the UEC pathway where so many patients can benefit from a single intervention. So it's supported the release of our inpatient beds earlier in the day, which in turn supports the flow through our emergency department and assessment units earlier in the day. We have been fortunate that we've been able to maintain ambulance handover times far better than many other trusts. So 15 out of the last 16 months, we've had the best ambulance handover performance within the West Midlands. That's for a multifactorial number of reasons, but this is definitely a contributory part to that. And ultimately, we know the harm that's caused in delays in emergency care. We've got very clear internal evidence of increased risk of mortality associated with prolonged stay within emergency departments, and a lot of national scrutiny, quite rightly at the moment, on the increased risk of patients associated with delayed ambulance responses or delayed handover from ambulances to EDs. So ultimately it's a patient safety and it's a patient quality intervention. And I think that's how we've tried to frame it as an organisation. We've got lots more that we could do to improve, so we're by no means there yet. But the impact in the last 2 or 3 years has been huge, and to have delivered those improvements over a period of time that's obviously had multiple waves of the COVID pandemic at different stages in the last sort of 2 or 3 years it's a testament to the team.
I really love that way you described the impact on five patients from one patient. I mean, that's a real compelling argument, isn't it, in terms of the impact. It's not just about that one patient, and just move. Sometimes we get in that mindset, we're just moving patients around, and it just feels like a single move. The way you've threaded that through all the way back to the patient, and putting that in the mindset of the teams as well to understand that's a really powerful learning to take away from this conversation, is about how a single activity such as a discharge lounge can have an impact all the way back through. And I guess you're releasing that one constraint, which is a major constraint within the UEC pathway. I mean, then touch on
just one thing perhaps further I'd add, Nick, that model of care, and certainly the 7 a.m. start in the morning, is predominantly geared around inpatient flow.
Yeah.
The later opening through the evening is slightly different, because of course most patients have already been discharged from wards by that time. But the emergency department still has patients that need to wait for transport or need to wait for something before they can leave. And we know that the evening is the busiest period of time for the emergency department. Our same day emergency care unit, so our frailty unit or our ambulatory emergency care unit, will have patients at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night that have clinically been discharged but are waiting for relatives to collect or for other final interventions. And the team can continue to free up cubicle space in those different services during the evening. So it's a double whammy, if you like, of the impact on admitted patient flow and of releasing cubicle space and therefore capacity in ED and SDEC units.
Again, it's an interesting model, because what you're doing is you're building the model based on the business need rather than just this is what we believe a discharge lounge is. It's here for a single purpose. You've looked at the needs of the patient and the organisation, and you're reflecting that in how you've amended and altered the style of it, and how you can respond at different times of day, which is really interesting, because that's about being flexible, isn't it? Again, we're responding to needs. Ned touched on it before about, I'm sure you've got more to do. This feels like an evolving piece of work. What's next for you in your plans to take us even further forward?
So from a discharge-led point of view, we want to work more closely and sit more with the base ward areas and the assessment areas like Ned was on about, to reinforce what the purpose of the discharge lounge is. So people on the wards will start thinking about discharging sooner, as in, I don't mean physically discharging the patient, but the process that the patient needs to go through for discharge. So try and work with them and educating the staff on the wards. Once obviously all the staff are fully imposed, my idea is that we'll go to the wards and support the wards through the actual discharge process, because we do it day in, day out now. It's like second nature to us. We want to go to these ward areas and support these areas to get these discharges correct and safe, because patient safety is paramount to us.
Yeah, that continued communication is important, isn't it? Just because,
it's building relationships up as well. The discharge lounge and the ward areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So there'll be lots of people around the country I know who'll be listening to this, who've got, either planning a discharge lounge or have an existing discharge lounge that maybe where you were a few years ago. If you had them in front of you now, what would be your top tips in terms of taking it forward?
Top tip, I think, first of all, is get your exec support. you absolutely wouldn't be
100%.
able to do it without them believing in what you were doing. So that's, to me, is your starting base. I have already mentioned it, the collaborative working with patient flow I think is absolutely key. We can then, like I say, use the discharge lounge to target the areas that we need to. I would say to be aware that an overcrowded, busy ED with ambulances that can't offload is an ED's problem. It's everybody's problem. And we're doing our little bit to support them patients getting the care that they need.
Key message.
Environment, absolutely key
Okay.
again. Being stuck at the end of a ward with areas that can be turned into overnight beds when needed, it's not appropriate, it won't work. We've been there, we've done that. We've had the cupboard at the at the end of the corridor that nobody else had any use for, and we've tried to put patients in there. The environment is key. It's got to be a homely environment. It's that step in between the ward and the patient actually going home. So psychologically it helps with the patients as well.
Transition. Right?
Yeah.
And as well, from our point of view, is trying to help with that patient, not just in the discharge lounge, but thinking of things of when they are discharged. So we put together a hospital to home project, so we work very closely with Walsall together. So they provide us with food parcels, and we refer them to the service, different hubs in the borough pick them up. They'll do safe and well sort of phone calls, befriender phone calls. They'll put them into in contact with different agencies if it can help them for like shopping or loneliness or gas and electric. Even if there's issues there, they can point them in the right direction. It's to sort of try and stop that bounce back of the patient, to try and stop that readmission, because you do get patients that end up back in because of social reasons, and it's helped to try and support that. We also work closely with the community matrons within the discharge lounge. So if we've got a patient in the discharge lounge that we think, yes, they are fit to go home, however they might end up being readmitted, we then refer to them and they pick them up from a nurse's perspective. So is there any services in the community that can go into them to stop them coming back into hospital? So we work very closely with a lot of agencies.
That's really helpful, that intermediary service between the hospital and
Yeah. Like yesterday we had a food delivery of 20 food parcels from this hospital to home project that we do. So they're all donated, and they just come, we ring them, and they bring them when we need some.
Brilliant. For yourself, top tips for others?
Probably 3, I think, from a sort of exec or coup perspective. If you're going to value the service, you've got to give them a proper home. And I've worked in many trusts where discharge lounges are not in an appropriate clinical location to facilitate the service. That often needs exec support, so I think you've got to do that. Secondly, you've then got to back and give permanent leadership to the service and make sure that the quality interventions are just as high priority as those associated with on-the-day patient flow. And thirdly, and we believe in this quite strongly at Walsall, we have what we call red lines that we don't cross. So we have not, in the 3 years I've been here, put an overnight inpatient in the discharge lounge. We don't put any overnight inpatients in our ambulatory emergency care areas, for example. And that's another indication that the organisation values the service. That may cause some short-term pressure on a given night shift, for example, but it will always support the bigger improvement and gain of having the benefits of the service the following morning. And we've said we'd do it, we've stuck to it, and I think that it can be done is what I would say. It's not easy, it's hard work, but it can be done. So those would be the bits I think that need the exec support.
Brilliant.
From my point of view, from like obviously being the band 7 on there, knowing that we've got that support, that is massive. And then my staff feel valued, and the team feels valued, and they do go above and beyond. They're here, there and everywhere in the hospital. You always see one of our staff running somewhere, whether it's pharmacy, because we do everything throughout the day, don't we? They're running from pharmacy, we take the patients out, they're literally there and everywhere. But they do it because they know they've got the support from the execs and obviously the matron.
As well. It sounds like there's a real clear sense of purpose as well.
There really is,
purpose. And if you look at other departments around the hospital, But they've got their own identity, haven't they? It's a real clear understanding of this is what we do. And Discharge Lounge is, I think what you've got there is a sense of we know what we do.
Yeah,
and that's
definitely.
what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much for your time. It's been a
Okay.
fascinating conversation. And as I said before, I think there'll be huge interest in this. So I think that's where we want to just share your story. Great intervention. I think the impact across the whole of the pathway is fascinating. It's not just about a single piece at the end of the hospital. So thank you very much for your time. This is the end of our podcast. Join us for our next one in the series coming out soon.